Peace, steppers. It's the big stepper back with some new drip. Check it out. So today we're going to talk about notarial protests. This is the process of enforcing your status in tickets, courts, discharge, whatever you're trying to do, whatever law you're trying to implement out here, because you are the true law enforcers. Most of these polices, judges, debt companies, whatever you're dealing with, they are policy pushers. They don't know the law. It's your responsibility to know the law, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. And when you're operating in lawfulness instead of legalities, you have to go through an administrative process known as a notarial protest. And the reason why it's important for your administrative process to be done through a notarial protest or a notary is because the notary is an officer of the court. So when we're dealing in court matters, or let me say matters of commerce, because when you swipe a credit card, you get a charge. When you get a ticket, you get a charge. They're both commercial matters that are handled both through administration, right? So let's say that you get a ticket. When you get that ticket, you need to accept that ticket for value, saying that I accept this charge that you're rendering if you can prove that it's an actual charge that applies to me. If you can prove that you have the jurisdiction in order to adjudicate upon this matter. But you do that through affidavit, because an unrebutted affidavit stands as truth in law. And we can structure our statements in a way that they can always and forever be unrebutted, unanswered, right? Because if they don't have an answer in law, then they don't answer at all. So that's why a lot of the times, going from tickets in commerce to going from debts in commerce, when you have a bill of sorts, this is why when you send out your discharge presentments, this is why they don't answer, all right? Because there is no answer for them to give, right? So if you do an affidavit of truth, or for example, if you give a bill of exchange, right, and that bill of exchange is to cover your debt, well, they could either take that bill of exchange, execute it in law, present it to the United States Treasury, because all obligations are obligations of the United States government, and get that debt settled or discharged for you. Or they could just not answer, process your promissory note or your bill of exchange or your negotiable instrument, whatever it is you sent to them, process it and get double paid by you, right? So what they decide to do is to not answer, because they know that you don't understand notarial protest. They understand that you don't understand the administrative process necessary to render a judgment outside of their jurisdictions, right? So no matter if you got a speeding ticket, taxes that you owe, or a bill in the mail, you respond to that in a negotiable instrument. You respond to that in an acceptance of value, and then you provide them affidavits that give them notice of their dishonor, right? So your first affidavit would be a notice of dishonor. Then you would give a 7 to 21 day time frame in between the time where you give your next notice. And the difference between a 7 or 21 day time frame depends on if you're dealing with a debt, or if you're dealing with a criminal case, or if you're dealing with a civil matter. All of those have different time frames in law. But you give notice, and then you give time for response, right? And then you give the opportunity to cure that dishonor. So first you tell them that, hey man, you made a dishonor. Now you give a time frame to give a opportunity to cure that dishonor. Then you give it a lot of time frame before you render them a default judgment, all right? And it's a judgment because you're doing your administrative process through a notarial protest, through a notary, which is an officer of the court. So an officer of the court can render a judgment through administration in your favor. This is why When you get a speeding ticket, they give you 30 to 45 days until your court date. This is why when you get your first bill, you go get a car note, they give you 45 days to your first payment, right? Because they're giving you the time to go through the proper administrative process to render the judgment for the situation before you get into any type of court pleading at all, right? So if I were to get a speeding ticket, which I won't get because I know how to operate in commerce properly, from driving to taxes to civil matters to criminal matters, we know how to operate in equity, you know what I mean, to get the surety that we're looking for, right? But if I were to get a ticket, then what I would do is do an affidavit that challenges their jurisdiction and states the rights that I have to travel or to do whatever the ticket is reflecting in my non-citizen national capacity. And I will conditionally accept the ticket that they gave me, saying that I will fully pay, fully adhere to anything that that ticket requires if they can prove that they have the jurisdiction to persecute me. And then I would send that off 3 times, you know what I mean, in one title as an notice of default, second as an opportunity to cure that default, and thirdly, I would render my default judgment. Then I would take that default judgment and operate between myself and the clerk of court, right? Because that's why the clerk of court is there 45 days before your court date. They're sitting there waiting for you to render your judgment, to prove to them that the judgment is already done, that there's a notary, an officer of the court has went through the proper administration to prove that you were not guilty or outside the jurisdiction of the court. And then you would get your dismissal before court even happens, before your court date. But since you don't do that, 95% of all of America goes to court, and that's why they have court fees. They charge you court fees even if you get found, you know what I'm saying? If you get found guilty, they charge you court fees because your judgment should have been rendered before there was a cost to the court. So it's not something that is a benefit to the people that's automatically given to you, because it's something that you should already supposed to operate it in your sovereign capacity, provided your own judgment, and save the court the time and energy of playing court. You know, when you on a basketball court, you know what I mean, the ball is being passed from one side to another. A football court, tennis court, or a courtroom is all about the ball being passed between one opponent and the next. On a basketball court, it's the Bulls and the Pacers. In the courtroom, it's the prosecutor and the defendant's attorney. You know what I mean? And the judge is nothing but the referee determining the rules. The administrative process is being followed properly, and the procedure is being followed properly. They're just referees making sure that the game on the court is being regulated the right way. So let's remove ourselves from the game of courts and put ourselves as the officials with the power and capacity to render judgment before the court even opens. And that's stepping. You know what I mean? That's taking control, power, freedom back, right? Because those who don't govern themselves are forced to be governed by those who do. So govern yourself, find yourself an officer of the court, a notary, and start to render your status as someone who does not harm another and has the right to operate any type of life that you and the Most High has ordained for you to live. They do not have any jurisdiction other than the jurisdiction that we give them. And with that being said, as always, peace and love. Step us.